Hello and welcome to podcast.init, the podcast about Python and the people who make it great. We're recording today on June 10th, 2015. Your hosts as usual are Tobias Macy and Chris Patty. You can follow us on iTunes, Stitcher, or TuneIn Radio, and please give us feedback. You can leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher, contact us on Twitter, send us an email at hosts@podcastinit.com, or leave a comment in our show notes. And if you'd like to support the show, you can find some donation buttons on the site at podcastinit.com. Today we're interviewing Eric Schles. Eric, could you please introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Eric Schles. I'm a data scientist at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, where I work on preventing and combating human trafficking.
How did you get introduced to Python?
Actually, it was a few different ways, but the first real sort of jump towards that was I took the MIT Introduction to Python course in preparation for a master's in computer science at NYU. And the program there focused heavily on Python, the master's did. And so, I became somewhat of an aficionado and eventually sort of moved towards mastery. But I also did the Khan Academy lectures as well as Code Academy, and those were both wonderful resources for starting me on my journey. Python's wonderful. I love the language, and I get to play with a lot of things because there's so many packages sort of implemented for you, right? So it's been very useful and helpful for the work that I do because people have done the hard work for me a lot of the time. So that's why I sort of stayed with Python over the course of my career. Now I use it at my day job, which is wonderful.
Yeah, that's been a very common thread with everyone we've spoken to, saying that one of the things that they really love about Python is the vast ecosystem of packages and libraries that they can draw on to do their daily work rather than having to start everything over from scratch.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, for instance, having access to deep belief networks and like neural nets just like for free basically is super powerful. I also make use of the requests library a ton. I think I use that probably more than anything else, just because a lot of the things I'm doing is pulling down data from like open web sources. But then also, you have all the native stuff, right? So like the string processing is fantastic. The native data structures are extremely intuitive. And then sort of the additional ones, right? So like building up, like, so for instance, the pandas data frame is so helpful for transformations and data cleaning. It's so much better than R, which is what I was using before for those two purposes. So I haven't found really a reason to use anything else when it comes to flexibility or moderate performance.
That's interesting that you say that you're using it in the stead of R and haven't found anything for your particular needs where R was actually superior. So that's interesting to hear.
Not for data cleaning. In terms of model selection, there's a bit in R that I don't find yet in Python, but in terms of data cleaning and data processing, I have not found the same utility with R.
So what inspired you to take up the fight against slavery? Is there a personal story behind that choice?
Absolutely. So we have to go back in time quite a bit, actually. So harken back to the summer of 1995. I was 12 at the time, and my family, my parents are a bit strange. They sort of did the globetrot thing when they were post-college, and both found themselves in India in a rather remote village, just for various reasons, mostly because they're nuts. And so we went back there to see where they had met. My parents wanted me to see where they had met, I guess, for strange reasons, because it was a horrible little village. But I saw a man in the street with a metal collar around his neck, and he was begging for food and change. And my father later explained to me that he was actually sort of not doing this for him. He was doing this because what happens is occasionally in small villages, parents have huge families, or people have huge families. They can't support their kids. Their farms dry up, especially when you're in the middle of the desert. And they end up putting their kids into slave labor, either begging or, they sell them. It's really bad. And so I found out about this when I was 12, which was perfect timing because I had just learned about slavery in America, and I was taking American history or something, and we had learned how Lincoln had freed all the slaves, and I was sort of confronted with this moment of, oh, no, it still happens everywhere else. This America got fixed, sort of, but not everywhere else. And so something inside me just sort of like broke. And then I spent, a couple of years sort of being depressed and trying not to think about it as much as I could. And then much of my late teens and early 20s thinking about how to stop slavery internationally. And it led me to economics, where I learned a whole bunch about how one could understand systems and sort of implement policy solutions to this. But, I needed to get my hands dirty with data. I needed to be able to build tools to be really effective. And also it's helped me build the developer community in Python is fantastic. And it's helped me build up this huge network of people who are looking and willing to help. So that's been great. Yeah. And then I guess after that I did sort of master's work and then computer science stuff. And so that sort of like brought me to where I am today. But it's interesting. As I started learning more about slavery, it sort of like also came on the rise in America because of the internet ease of use with that. Brought actually a lot more demand in America and allowed sort of traffickers here to sort of communicate and to reap supernormal profits, which have been not great. So technology has been both a blessing and a curse to America. It wasn't actually as bad a problem, or at least it wasn't as well documented a bad problem. In the 90s in America, I was interested in international focus, but there's sort of been this rise locally, which is why I bring it up. And so using technology, hopefully we can combat it in this country, and then I'll find more standard sort of policy solutions abroad, because everyone's on the same policy page here in America.
So, some of your work touches on the deep web. Can you provide our listeners with some context around what that term means and the role it plays in what you do?
Sure. So, the deep web refers to, I'm being a bit vague here, but it relates to websites that require the Tor network among other networks. It's basically not the normal internet. So the Silk Road, for instance, is a great example of a deep web website. You have to access it through the Tor network. You have to sort of .onion sites are all examples of deep web things. They're not easily scraped. They don't live at static IP addresses. Unless you know how to get to them, you can't always get to them. You can also, by the way, search normal websites like google.com or something through the Tor network, and it's also anonymous, which is important. So when you visit a website through the Tor browser, the Tor browser essentially obfuscates your identity completely. And so you have this like anonymous web experience where no one knows who anyone else is. And that's sort of the point. So there are a few caveats there. Some people have been able to map some pieces of this through a lot of statistics, but you still can't get at 100% certainty who anyone is on the deep web. So how this plays into my work is not going to take a huge leap of intellectual thought. Basically, because everyone's anonymous, you can do things like post interest in essentially buying and selling people. So this happens on some deep websites. Standard scrapers, web scrapers typically cannot handle this, although there are some tools in Python among other languages that do this. So you can make use of Selenium and then mechanize the Tor browser. There's a Tor driver, and you can use that to scrape the content on the deep web. But if you send the requests, if you use the request library and try to just do a get against some deep web website, you will not get anything back. Actually, I've never tried it, so I'm not 100% sure that will happen. You might get something back, but I'm reasonably sure you won't. So standard HTTP requests won't work. I don't want to go into the internals of why this or how this works, though, just because, then it's a very long discussion.
That's a whole show unto itself.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's a whole show unto itself. But yeah, the deep web is interesting. I actually am for privacy, aware web browsing. I think that if people are honest and don't use it for bad things, then the deep web is not necessarily a bad idea. I think conceptually it's very important. And I think you can build privacy aware systems that still give information that's pertinent. So I think also the web needs a bit of a redesign, if I'm being critical. And, people like Bruce Schneider have sort of talked about this. He does he does a wonderful rant. I got to see him in person recently, actually, which was really cool. And he does a wonderful rant about how we need to be making our web technologies more privacy aware and sort of stopping this aggregation thing, that you can actually build systems that are still safe, that still allow us to get the information when it's necessary, but don't require overkill like the Tor experience. So, but I think privacy is very important, and we should all cherish it. It's just unfortunate when some bad actors really, sort of mess things up for the rest of us. But that's sort of where we're at because of this technology. We have to sort of, go a little deeper into this because of bad actors. So to sum up, you can sort of think of the deep web as the internet of the old days, but also a really scary version of that, where pictures of young women and young men, like 5 or 6 year olds, are posted. And, these are women, young men, or children, I should say, children that are exploited, and there's no way around it. And the deep web has allowed that practice to propagate and allowed people who are deviant to become increasingly more deviant, because they can congregate now. They can have conversations. They can learn from one another. They build communities. They have parties. I can't say further than how I know that, but I can say that I know they have parties. And it's terrible. So that's what the deep web has unfortunately afforded us now.
You don't even have to be a researcher to, I didn't know about the parties per se, but I'm actually very interested in Tor because I feel like, as you pointed out, privacy is important. Even not necessarily so much here in the United States, but I feel like it's very important for someone in China or Iran or whatever to be able to get access to a relatively free and unrestricted internet, just like we have. And I feel like Tor is a great tool to enable that. But anybody who has set up Tor in the Tor browser bundle or whatever and gone poking around to any really significant extent, you can't walk 10 steps, metaphorically speaking, without stubbing your toe on a pedophilia site. It's rampant in Tor Hidden Service Land, which I think is a really unfortunate thing. And so that's why I think projects like yours are so incredibly important, because we need to not just say, well, Tor is for pedos. I think we need to actually work to make sure that it's a tool that can be used effectively by the people who really need it, right?
Right, absolutely. I think you're 100% right. I would argue for something. So my fear is that you can't stop deviance, right? Like, sort of like, if you live in a society where all ideas are free, the bad ones are going to get out too. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have that. I think we absolutely need to have all ideas expressed, unless they're, something that actively damns others or in other ways causes them to have a loss of freedom. But right, so the point I'm trying to drive at is that because of these services, I think that Tor takes it to too far an extreme. That being said, of course, if you're in a place like China, then or some places in Africa or the Middle East where or even some places in South America, if you voice your opinions, you get killed. So for instance, I can't remember what city it was in, but there was a city that's using Twitter right now to get all of their news and updates and things. And there are these women that are going around and young men who are going around and sort of providing insights and news because the news organizations have collapsed. And for speaking out about where the terror is happening, where the drug cartels are, where the human trafficking is, where the drug trafficking is, they're getting killed, and their pictures are being put up on websites saying, this is what happens to snitches. And so for that kind of thing, something like Tor is necessary. I don't think we have the right system yet, though. I think we're close, but there has to be a way to sort of protect the freedoms of the many from getting killed if they're doing something legitimate, but also allowing or disallowing folks like pedophiles to run rampant. And maybe that's, you have some voting of the entire population. Like, the entire population on Tor says, no, this website is bad, it gets shut down that day. Maybe democracy is not the right answer, but, I feel like there has to be a mechanism, because right now it's got to come from the people. I mean, policing is going to happen, and we're not going to stop, right? Predictive analytics and data science is being integrated into law enforcement more and more, which I am really proud of. I think we need more understanding of technology, not less. But at the end of the day, I think there needs to be some sort of protocols in place to stop it on a mass level and to be self-policing. Because right now it's not, and that's that simple.
No, absolutely. I mean, the Tor project feels very strongly that your assertion is wrong, essentially, right? And that in providing the tools to allow people in those crazy distressed places, like you said, these embattled cities, or Syria or Iran or China, who are under serious duress and, as you mentioned, could die literally if the fact that they were publishing these things gets out. They feel like absolute anonymity is the only thing that works, is the only thing that can help. And I'm pretty sure it would be really interesting to get a response from Tor to your assertions. But I'm guessing, having run a relay for a while myself and having read a bit of the literature and the mailing lists and such, their response would be there is no way to provide that kind of a mechanism without lessening the effectiveness of the anonymity that Tor provides. And it's really interesting. You guys are kind of I feel like I'm listening to a debate between Richard Stallman and, I'm not sure, someone from the proprietary software community here, but it's a really interesting polar situation.
Well, okay. I am absolutely not from the proprietary community. I believe in open sourcing everything. I think no code should be closed source.
I totally understand, and I apologize. I was using an analogy. I was just saying that your stance is a viewpoint at one end of the spectrum. Tor seems to be at kind of the other end of the. Maybe you're more towards the middle, actually. So you're not saying Tor is bad. You're saying Tor is good. It's just imperfect, and we need ways to stop it from being this den of pedophilia, which in a way it currently is, because, as I say, even as a casual explorer of the deep web, you kind of almost can't help but bump into this stuff. And I honestly found there are other people who feel the same way, right? Like there's the what do they call it, the hidden wiki or something like that, and there's now a censored version that basically, so you can find good sites on Tor that aren't pedophilia oriented if you are interested in anonymity and privacy and things like that. So you're not the only one who feels this way. And I actually think it's at least worthy of some research to see, is there a way that we can build some kind of safeguards into the system to make what you're saying a possibility?
Right. And I think that would be all I would ever argue for. Now, I don't want to, get into the most ardent of hardcore debates about this, because at the end of the day, I'm not a novice when it comes to the deep web, but there are people more capable of having this debate than I am, if that makes sense. I am not, by any stretch of the imagination, a master of network things. I am very, very good at data science, but that's where my skill set lies. But look, there is this problem, right? There is this problem with the deep web, and it affects real people that, honestly, not that it would be impossible, and it absolutely happens on the regular web, right? So I think making the deep web less anonymous centric will probably not solve the problem, but if it means that, I don't know, 1,000 kids, 10,000 kids, like where do you draw that line? Where their lives are better because you can't profit off of, or maybe it makes someone less likely to even try to profit off of them as sexual objects. And it honestly depends. It's a hard debate to have because you don't know how much of this stuff is recycled. I don't know of any metrics on the amount of actual pedophilia that actually happens. And if you took a statistical study and actually measured it, could you even figure out how much legitimate pedophilia there is going on? I don't know the answer to any of these questions, but my guess is it's probably a lot, right? Because you operate with essentially no real safeguards, and you operate in such a way that there's no real, unless you're really stupid, there's no way to get caught. And so I worry about these things. And I say this having met people who have been, I mean, in my line of work, who have met people who were victims of child sexual abuse and child sex trafficking, and they don't grow up to be good people. I mean, and not by any fault of their own. They end up becoming trafficked for a lot of their life. These women start out this way. Sometimes these men start out this way, where they're sexually abused, and they end up believing that sex is the only way that they can make money because they didn't have a good upbringing. And so, if you can't curtail the child pornography and the pedophilia industry in a very real way, you can't stop sex trafficking because it's a culture thing. Yeah. Sorry, it's getting too depressing.
No, it's not at all. I mean, I think that's why we had you on the show. And moreover, I think that you should feel good about the fact that, so let's sort of say, like you said, I totally agree. It doesn't make much sense, perhaps, to get into a hardcore debate over is Tor the right answer or not, or should Tor change? Because what we're here to talk to you about is the awesome fact that you have made this incredible tool set for the forces of good, right? And you are actually policing the deep web to try to help root out these incidences of human trafficking. And I think anybody with the slightest shred of morality in them can agree that that is absolutely a really good thing. And as I say, you should feel incredible about it.
Oh, sure. No, most days I get to go to sleep saying, did I regret anything today? And the answer is usually no. It's hard day after day to look at the problem domain and not feel a little bit worn down just because you're seeing so much of the worst tragedies in humanity, I think, that we've ever seen, because it's structural and baked in to systems that you believe are there to help people in a sense, right? Because technology is supposed to make our lives better. We're seeing it make our lives worse. And the consumers of the trafficking industry, these are not people that are poor. These are usually very wealthy individuals. The sex trafficking industry is doing really well. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And so you have to ask yourself, if it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, who are the people that are paying all that money into it? And it's unfortunately, wealthy individuals. Maybe you would think that the people with power and money, and obviously it's nowhere near everyone, right? But there is a subclass of wealthy individuals who are consumers of this product of human suffering, more or less. And so there's some level of sort of like structural dissonance that's going on in our society, and it's something we need to address. And that's what I'm trying to do, honestly. I'm trying to address it. And I should note also that usually the consumers of the sex industry were in some way sexually abused themselves at a young age. It's not everyone, but there is a subset of this population. There have been psychological studies on this. I can't think of any of them off the top of my head, but they definitely exist. I know anecdotally sex therapists who have worked with people who are recovering from sexual addiction, and they went through sort of similar things. And these are guys who worked in finance, who had very high stress jobs, but were legitimately brilliant, but couldn't see how much they were hurting someone else. So I think there is some structural dissonance that allows this sort of system to persist. And we're only starting to address it, which is the really depressing part. But, hopefully we can do something meaningful.
Absolutely. And just to quickly address your point about technology that's meant to do good being used for something bad. I mean, that's been the case ever since the cavemen picked up a stick and said, hey, or, I can build something with this, or and then used it to club, their fellow caveman over the head. So it's since technology has existed, it has always been that dichotomy of, do we use this for good or do we use this for evil, right? Just about every single piece of technology ever can be used for either.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not so naive that I believe that technology will always be used for good, but it's about, and I should clarify this, so I appreciate you like sort of bringing that up. It's about the level at which with technology is being used for bad as opposed to good, right? So like someone picks up a stick and hits this fellow caveman, I don't know if we should have an outcry. If someone uses technology to deprive someone of the ability to have a life, I feel like that's taking technology to a place where I don't know if there's a way back from unless we stop it now.
Yeah, another anomaly of our modern age is the scale at which our technology allows an individual to operate, whether for good or for bad. So, taking it back to the stick analogy, yes, somebody can pick up a stick and use it to assault their fellow caveman or fellow human or whatever, but that's a potentially isolated incident, and the potential magnitude for that level of harm is inherently limited. Whereas with our current technologies, whether it be the internet or various forms of software or even our nuclear arsenals, our capacity for harm is drastically increased, and we are increasingly isolated from the effects thereof, which really just makes it easier to dehumanize the victims of that harm. So because you are one or several steps removed from the actual suffering, you're not as visceral for you.
Absolutely. I think that is a fantastic point, right? So this is I think the core of the dissonance that I'm referring to, because I was vague, and I realize that now. Because we have so much, it's not like with a car. So when motor vehicles and mechanization happened, we were still close to the things that we were mechanizing, and so it was clear if you hit someone with a car, they die. With computers, we've created this layer of abstraction from the results of the technological innovation that has happened around us. And so there's this dissonance of reward and risk, and also of cause and effect. And I think that that's something that we need to bake into our systems a little bit better. And there are people that are trying to do this. I can speak to 2 such projects. So actually 3. Google has been actually wonderful about this, and I have some friends at google.org who work on anti-trafficking things, and they're wonderful. They do great stuff. One of the things they did was they put the anti-trafficking hotline at the top of any search related to trafficking. So that means if you're looking for it, it's sort of like a reminder. It's like there are victims here, and I think that's yielded some results, but it's a sort of like, okay, so this is, these are eyeballs, we're trying to bake that in. Another example of this is some work being done by Professor Darren Hayes over at Pace University. He's a good friend, and he is working on the mobile space. So what he's doing is creating fake profiles on places like Tinder and I believe OkCupid and other places like this, racy young women, and if you sort of click on their profile, it'll send you to trafficking awareness things. I also am aware of, there's a group up in Boston that I believe does this as well, called Hunt Alternatives, and they work specifically in like advertising space. So they'll put up an ad for a girl, you click on the website for if you want to buy, and it'll tell you like statistics about what happens with trafficking. And so it's sort of like trying to bring awareness to the people that are engaging in this practice by confronting them where they live almost, which is, I don't know if it's the best way to do it, but it's something, and I think it's an evolving conversation that will continue to hopefully yield positive results.
So, redirecting our conversation a little bit, why did you choose Python as opposed to any other tool for writing your search engine?
So, I chose Python for a number of reasons. The most important one was we needed solutions quickly, right? So this problem is happening now. We needed a tool that could sort of handle evolving needs from the people that I work with at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, as well as something that would be supportable, readable, easy to use, and was robust. So Python sort of fit the bill really, really well. I was able to not only sort of do rapid development around each of the tools, I was able to incorporate new features quickly because Python is so flexible. I was able to, take in modules as needed and start using them right away, and also maintain the code base fairly easily just because Python is somewhat self-documenting, right? It's basically pseudocode. It's so much easier to read than C++. And also with the right sort of resources computationally, it was easy to scale up as needed, which was important. Also, I made use of the Flask framework heavily. Web development is probably easier in Flask than it is, I think, than many other sort of web technologies, right? So there are sort of notable things here, right? Like Ruby on Rails and Sinatra and the mean stack. But I think Flask is easier to sort of template out, prototype, and then check to see if you are doing things correctly. And so armed with basically Flask, so I could create a really simple web interface for my analysts to use, and all the data science, machine learning packages, and all of the wonderful high-level wrapped sort of web scraping technologies that Python comes with, I was able to build tools robustly and quickly. So just to delve a little bit into what I was able to come away with in terms of tools. To date, I've built around 30 tools. At the Open Data Science Conference, I got to display three of them. Sort of display two of them and talk about a third. So you saw a very small subsection of what I've been able to build while at the district attorney's office, because Python is so fast and flexible and easy to develop it. One of my friends sort of says Python optimizes developer time, and I think that's absolutely true. An example of this would be the first day that I started on the job. They sort of planned out what they thought would be the next 2 years of my life. Someone had been working on this tool in C++ for about 2 years, hadn't finished it, actually had retired. I was able to use existing modules and finish the tool and put it into production about 3 weeks later, after my start date. And I don't think it's because I'm a better developer. This is a senior guy, he had years of experience, but he had been working in C++. And so the tool never got finished. And I was doing really standard things. It just pulled information out of a PDF. That was all they needed to do, and just turned it into an Excel document. And it took him years and years to do this because it's not as flexible. You can't sort of stand on the shoulders of giants. And I think that's what Python allows you to do.
That's all great information and a great story of how somebody can use Python to explore a problem domain and come away with something useful in a pretty short amount of time versus maybe some other older or more traditional programming languages.
Well, but even what you mentioned with regards to Ruby is, for instance, the data science tools that we have in Python just really don't exist over there. I mean, sure, there are certain things, but there's not nearly the rich palette of options that the Python community has. And I'm not saying that like in terms of, Python's better, but in this case, for this particular problem domain, it is provably better and easier, and you've proven that with your explanation.
Yeah, sure. I would say that doing data science in Ruby is challenging. I think people can do it, but it's definitely not as easy. There is an extremely robust community, and I think this is mostly because of the data frame that Wes McKinney built. I think having access to that sort of galvanized people around this and said, oh, you can do data science in Python, and sort of made it a reality. Yeah, I actually found his talk really wonderful at the Open Data Science Conference. If you guys didn't see it, you totally should. It was great. But yeah. So I think that data science just is easier. You have sklearn, you have a really robust data frame, you have traditional modeling through stats models, you have really great and easy visualization tools, so matplotlib, as well as Vincent, which lets you compile basically to D3. It's so easy to build really robust visualization. So you sort of have this full stack data science toolkit at very low cost. With like about 5 or 7 lines of code, you can build a visualization for a social network. I don't know of a lot of other programming languages that allow that to be done that easily. I mean, I think this may exist in R, but it's far more difficult. Like I have a colleague that works in R at work, and he hasn't figured out how to do sort of this yet. So I'm trying to convince him that he should just use Vincent and then it'll be okay. But yeah, I would say that doing data science in Python is easy and fun, as long as you like math a lot.
So can you provide a high-level description of the technical details of the search engine that you created? And if you don't mind me inserting my own personal spin here, maybe give us a little bit of a sense of what it's like to interact with Tor through Python?
So basically what's happening is it's a directed search engine, right? I'm not scraping the entire internet because that would be silly. I'm not Google. I don't have those resources. There's no reason for me to do so. But what I am doing is I'm starting at a seed, the same way Google does, except my seed is gross websites, like the grossest websites you could possibly imagine. Like, it's like if you went to Google except everything was like porn that you felt uncomfortable watching and were saddened by seeing, that would be my seed. And then what I do is I traverse all of the links. So basically there are a bunch of links on web pages, right? And you can traverse these. So I use recursion to traverse these websites, and I go like n levels deep, where n varies depending on the website and what I'm actually searching for. So it's also a directed search engine. So it's a little bit more manual than Google, right? So you query for a thing, and then it gives you like 10 billion pages in like a second. What I'm doing is I'm querying for specific information. So phone numbers, I'm querying for email addresses, and I'm also querying for text that I received or a analyst received for a case. So the way that we get specific case information is through honest detective work. People will sort of say, hey, we got this new case, it looks like trafficking, you should take a look. And so basically what we do is we start a workup, and my search engine goes to work. It looks for any more links. It looks for further instances where this name, this phone number, email address, or similar sort of writing to an ad, if there's an advertisement associated. If not, then it'll just go off of phone numbers, because when someone's arrested, we get their phone information, so we have a way of contacting them if we don't send them to jail, and if we do put them in holding, then we still get their phone numbers, typically. And so these are hard attributes that you can then use to search the web and find more information about this person. If we find advertisements linking to Backpage, if we find other sort of prostitution-y sort of websites that are connected in some way in a hard attribute way to, and by hard I mean a clear causal link between this person and this website, then we think it's trafficking, and we start our investigation in earnest. Yeah, so right now we have like 30 ongoing investigations and I think 9 or 10 active indictments. Not most of which did not come through this tool. I've only been there 8 months. It takes a really long time to bring an indictment, but I've been able to aid in a few of the cases since I started, and bring in more information more fast. So the faster you can get information downloaded, which is essentially what I'm doing, because right now for this people were just using Google or whatever. So I'll talk about that in a second, and how this relates to the deep web and why my tool's helping a little bit there. Basically, I've been able to take this thing that was manual and took maybe weeks to taking that and turning it into days or hours or even minutes. So if you can do this, then you can work more cases at once, your analysts are less overloaded, and then you save time and money, which is great for the government, and also allows us to work more cases at once. Because we're a small team, right? There's like 7 full-time staff members in the human trafficking unit. Maybe I'm missing someone. Let me think. 5. No, there's like 9 or 10. And then there's like sort of part-time people that help out from other units, but they're like, this is really depressing, we need more people on this, and so they sort of pitch in, which is really wonderful. So talking about Google, so obviously Google doesn't scrape everything. It doesn't scrape the deep web, and so being able to scrape the deep web is really important. I do want to say a lot of our deep web scraping right now comes from the Memex tool, which was developed by Darpa. They index a lot of the deep web for us, specifically around sex trafficking. I'm working on solutions that are not big enough for them to spend their time on, but are not small enough that it can't just be done by a person manually. So there's still some need for some automation. So the Darpa Memex project is being sort of piloted out to a bunch of folks around the country. Obviously, DARPA is a national organization. For those of you who don't know what DARPA is, it's the Defense Advanced Research Programs Agency. Yeah, that sounds right. And they do a lot of wonderful, amazing work, and they've given us this Memex tool, among other places. And so that is the primary way that deep web scraping happens. But like I said before, what my tool does is I just use Selenium. I know what .onion sites I want. I sort of say, scrape this, and then it follows, the links the way the Tor browser would, using the Tor driver that comes with Selenium, and scrapes all the information down. It's actually pretty easy to do that once you know where you want to point your Tor browser at to get at information. But obviously, you can't sort of do this over a course of days, right? You have to do this like, okay, I've got like a little bit of time to scrape all the information that I want. Yeah.
So does Memex, for you, does it work like Google essentially, where you can query it and get results back?
So you put in specific web addresses, and then I scrape them and continue to scrape them for... So I'm typically scraping not the deep web, right? So Memex is sort of focused on the deep web things a little more than I am, but you have the capability of putting in deep web websites and then pulling down information regarding that. Memex indexes the entire internet. So they have the ability and the funding and the resources to do so, and so they do. But they also don't scrape everything, right? So let's say we came across a website and one person is running it. That is not worthy of Memex's time to set up the indexing and go through all the instrumentation. Memex is a huge project, and it spans many, many research universities and many, many funding sources and many, many subcontractors. And so being sort of like, hey, Memex, we need this thing. We need it tomorrow. You can't do that, right? So that's why you have someone like me in-house who can sort of be more flexible when they can't move forward. And also, I do a lot of design work for the Memex project, so they come to me for like suggestions on how to make the tool better, how to make it integrate more easily with the analysts. But the initial tool was developed by Chris White, who is amazing, and so that was how it started. And now a lot of folks are working on this. It's become like a real multi-million-dollar project, and so it can't be as flexible as they once were, and that's why I'm useful.
So, what are some of the technical and legal challenges that you've experienced in the course of your work?
Technical challenges usually involve really advanced machine learning things. I'm still not the best at image stuff. I'm actually working right now on a facial recognition platform and the ability to pull numbers out of images, because oftentimes on these websites there'll be a phone number across an image. But I think that using some tutorials on the MNIST dataset and just OpenCV and a few other things, hopefully that challenge will be resolved within the next week. I actually was playing around with an initial solution that got pretty close to 94% accuracy before this call, so hopefully that will be done within the next week. But most of my technical challenges are around sort of image processing things. I'm an NLP guy, so it's new ground for me, but it's fun. It's fun. I would say, yeah, that'd probably be my biggest technical challenges. Legal challenges are a little less present just because I work for lawyers, and so they kind of know what I'm allowed to do and what not allowed to do. And so they're sort of like, okay, you can work on this, you can't work on that. You can work on this, you can't work on that. And so there's a clear sort of like division about where my time should be spent, and I just don't work on things that will be sort of not legally allowed or anything like that. And I have stumbled into this a couple times. It's really tricky when you work for law enforcement what you can and cannot do, but I have very capable, gifted bosses.
So does your search engine try to infer who might be engaged in sex work voluntarily as opposed to those being forced into it against their will?
So no, and that's because we get all of our casework from an honest from like initial investigation. So you need to have either landed in the hospital or been the subject of domestic violence or been like referred to in some way in the initial investigation that indicates that you are not getting your full rights and like a physical or sexual abuse is happening to you. And so none of our cases we benefit from the fact of having, you know, human observation on our side. And the NYPD is very good about figuring out what is like legitimate or not legitimate, but like not coerced sex work versus there's very clear signs. And so when we start an investigation, we're reasonably sure something is going on. And we've also gotten very good at knowing what trafficking looks like just from like a point of fact sort of way. Now that's of course local to New York, right? If you look nationally or internationally, trafficking looks very different. It's different in different cultures. There are different signs to look for. Some of them ones that are the same everywhere are the girl was abused or the guy was abused physically. So there's some sort of like physical issue, and they usually are afraid to say why. So typically, if a girl is being physically abused and she's a prostitute, she will say that her boyfriend hit her, not her pimp. Because if she says her pimp hit her, then they know it's trafficking, because that's pretty much the definition. When you're being coerced into having sex against your will for money and then not being able to keep the money, well, that's the whole definition. But if you're forced into having sex against your will, that's for for any reason, that's pretty much either rape or sex trafficking. So that happens, and then we have very clear patterns of indication, though, typically that it's sex trafficking. So my tool does not do any semantic analysis around whether prostitution is legal or not legal. Also, it's very hard to do that, I should say. And I don't think you could pick up anything from an ad because no one's going to raise a flag and say, yeah, I'm trafficked. I mean, I'm sure that one could come up with a scheme if they had a full view of the internet and you knew everything that was happening on every person's cell phone, but that again gets into the privacy debate, which is dangerous territory.
There is, I know it may be the minority, but there are cases out there where people choose sex work, as a lucrative source of income. Whether it's right or wrong is another story altogether, but it definitely is a thing. So I'm glad to hear that the way that people come to your attention makes it very clear that your services are needed.
We want to make sure that we're only helping people that want to be helped. If people want to be prostitutes for money, I don't know. I guess I say good for them. It's up to you. If people are in trouble, then we want to help them. That's sort of the end of it.
So you mentioned that this looks very different regionally, and that what you're talking about is a New York specific thing. I can understand in different cultures internationally, but as just for instance, how is sex trafficking different in Boston than in New York? I ask because I'm a Bostonian.
So sex trafficking in Boston is probably very similar. The classification is not city to city. The classification is city, rural, or suburban. So sex trafficking in Long Island, for instance, or in a suburb of New Jersey would look very different than it does in Manhattan. Boston and New York, it would look very similar. So you could apply the metrics that we're doing and coming up with in other cities. And in fact, we intend on doing that. We intend on collaborating with other cities, taking the learnings that we have, taking the learnings that they have, all becoming better. And there are conferences around this already. So it's not like we haven't already started, it's just we intend to keep doing this. But, for instance, in fracking towns, I believe it's either Montana or North Dakota or South Dakota, I can never remember which state exactly it's happening in. It might be all three, which is the reason I say that. So what's happening there is women are being sort of shipped in by the busload for these sort of boom towns that are coming up. And not all of them are getting there legitimately. Some people are setting up sex trafficking shops in these sort of fracking towns. And so it looks very different in a place where it's a fracking boom town than in Canal Street in Manhattan. So that's the difference. I think that you would probably end up with a very similar situation in Boston. There's going to be cultural norms that are different between New York and Boston, but more or less it's going to be a young woman who's being physically abused, who says that her boyfriend is beating her when in fact it's her pimp beating her, and she sort of ends up in the hospital. And so we get a call and it's like, oh, hey, let's do something about this. So that would be how that would go. But in a boomtown, right, completely different set of infrastructure that really isn't any. You have very different sort of population distributions. It's 90% men and then 10% women, or there are maybe even two women in the town. But you'll see hundreds of ads for sex workers if you go to some of these places, and that's sort of what's going on here moment. That's somewhat of what the regional stuff is.
So what was the most surprising fact that you uncovered as part of your research?
Oh, the child sex trafficking websites, by far and away. The first time I saw one, I was both disgusted and shocked. Actually, I was a whole mix of emotions, but mostly I just wanted to put my fist through a wall, and in fact every wall. Because when you see girls sexualized in that way, there is no other response than, I need to hurt someone. There's just no way around it. It's so depressing and sad. So that was the most shocking. And seeing it not on the deep web was probably the worst part about it. Being oh wow, these guys are they're just on the regular internet. They are comfortable being this. Okay, so when do we go into their house and arrest them and stop this? Was sort of tomorrow? Can we go tomorrow? We know the police. Let's go tomorrow. Buying everyone sandwiches, and we're gonna just take them down because due process is important. But we're sure right now. So So that was the worst thing.
I can well imagine. I can only, yeah, I mean, that's, on the one hand, that's what makes what you do so incredible. And on the other hand, that's part of what makes what you do so unique. I don't think I could do that job because I think I would have a very hard time remaining within the framework of the law if I encountered things like that. It must get tough.
It is so hard. I mean, I've never done anything bad or illegal. Thankfully, I've always been able to sort of like recover. But I mean, that day, I just literally went outside to the park that's by my office and just started yelling as loud as I could because I didn't know what else to do. And then I went back in and finished writing the automation so that we could get these. I'm sorry to curse, but there's no other way to call them. That is their designation.
I think we're good. I'm guessing that we don't have any minors listening to our podcast, but we can bleep you out if that becomes necessary. But in any case, very cool. So, without revealing anything you shouldn't, are you aware of anyone being set free as a result of your work?
So I can speak to the fact that people have been set free as a result to our work because it's not my work, it's everyone's work. There's a team, it's very collaborative. There are investigators, there are lawyers, there are analysts, there's me, there's the larger district attorney's office, there's the police department. It's absolutely and there's a human anti-human trafficking unit in the police department too, and they absolutely play a part in every single investigation that we take part in. The FBI helps us. Like it's not. I would never call it my work. I would call it our work, and I'm thankful every day that I have collaborators because 10 years ago, it was just me thinking about, well, okay, so how do I bring down the biggest, oldest form of human sadness ever, and to like having many, many people that I can call colleagues. So yeah, I would say that we have set people free, and it honestly is what keeps me from going insane.
So, given the complicated socioeconomic aspects of human trafficking and prosecution of those who are responsible, can you discuss some of the moral and ethical considerations that you've been confronted with while building these tools?
Yes. The most important moral and ethical considerations, and it is an extremely nuanced area, so I appreciate sort of stating that explicitly. Privacy is probably the biggest concern for me. Okay, I've just automated this process, right? Another coder might be able to come in, and I try to make my code as hard to change from use specificness as possible. I try not to build my tools in too general a way so that you could then take this and spy on everyone. But someone could take the methodologies that I'm applying here and do sort of a big brothery thing if they tried hard enough. But all that is documented really well on the internet, so anyone in the government could probably do this anyway. But it's something that I do worry about. One day, having my tools being used by someone who has less than good intentions. Yeah, I think, though, being a realist, no one really gets into the government unless they have good intentions. And if they don't have good intentions, they tend to leave rather quickly because the pay is awful. Like, if you're not a good person, you don't stay for the power because the pay is sort of like you leave very fast. So I'm only sort of minimally concerned about this.
Do you think that's true of the government in general or of law enforcement in particular?
I think it's true of local government at any sort of level. I don't know about the federal level, right? So obviously you have all the things with NSA and the FBI and the CIA custody. Right. So at that level, but I'm not building tools for them. They don't have access to my source. They have access to the open source things that I do, but those tools exist in so many other formats and ways at this point, like Scraper Wiki, Google image search, right? I'm not reinventing the wheel. I'm not inventing a better mousetrap for someone who wants to use this towards malicious ends. I think that investigators could use it to like do something shady if they really, really wanted to, but there's so many other things available to them that I feel like my tools are sort of dropping the bucket. when it gets to that level. Now, of course, no one at the district attorney's office until me had the technical ability to sort of implement a lot of these tools, unfortunately. I'm trying to change that so hard. I'm actually working on a open source book to teach my colleagues at the DA's office how to use Python in particular, but how to program generally. So, and part of me coming on the show was I'm hoping that people will help me write this open source book and make it better. So this way I can teach folks in a lasting way, so the day I leave because I'm not going to do this forever. It's too depressing to do forever. I will probably end up either working for a big company or starting my own company that does advocacy work, but in a less direct way at some point, just because the work is so emotionally taxing. But I'm hoping that technological innovation will be something that I can bring to the local government sort of permanently, so that they have a way of saving time, getting correct results, and actually doing the due diligence to help the people that matter.
That's so great. It's really interesting to hear you say that, because I mean, I'm sure you're aware of the whole civic hacking movement, right? Like Code for America and the various civic hacking groups that have formed in municipalities and cities and towns all across the nation. So it's really kind of neat to see that movement coming from both the outside in and from the inside out.
Absolutely, and I'm part of a collective of folks that are interested in this. So sometimes I work out of a place called Civic Hall, which is sort of like a meeting ground in New York City for folks that are interested in civic and social innovation. There are a whole host of folks inside and outside of government that are coming together now and having conversations that are important, and talking about technology and how it can be used to better the lives of all of us. So I think it's an exciting time. I think that there are a lot of reasons to be hopeful in the broader scheme of things, and I think that we might start to see real social justice and change in the betterment of all, at the very least in this country. In the major cities, I think urbanization is making us more thoughtful, sensitive, and hopefully capable individuals who can live freer, happier lives.
I think that's so important, and I'm so glad to see that this movement, as I say, happening on multiple levels, because talking about technology and how it can be used for both good and for ill, I feel like, and not to necessarily disagree with your countermand, your previous point about Tor, but I feel like, from my perspective anyway, the right approach is not to try to restrict or ratchet down on, but to try to say, how can we do good to counter it? You know what I'm saying? Like, how can we encourage and promulgate the good?
Sure, and that is my intention. With my earlier remarks about Tor, I don't think it should go away. I want to be very clear on that. I think that we need to just build a better system, and that means sort of being more thoughtful and empathetic. And I think that that's something that we can apply to a lot of our technology. I think it's not limited to Tor at all. I think there are so many things that we can make more empathetic, more positive, and more capable of actually, I mean, the way people are using Twitter right now, for instance, like I mentioned with that earlier example, I don't think that's something that people thought about when they started, and Twitter's been used in many instances for social democracy and good. I think there are so many places where technology like that can be powerful. And we just have to find more ways of doing this sort of thing, and then we'll be able to do something meaningful that couldn't happen 100 years ago, which is exciting.
To paraphrase you a bit, I think that as engineers, we're all guilty of anytime somebody hears the word build, they automatically jump to the idea of technology, but we don't necessarily need to build a better Tor system. We need to build a better social system around the use of Tor to improve the landscape and ecosystem around what is available on those networks. So rather than trying to modify the technical aspects of it, we need to modify the ethical and moral aspects and outlooks of the people who are using it, and empower them to have some capability of policing their networks within that overall art.
Yes, definitely.
So are there any projects out there that you consider similar to what you're working on?
Yes, I would say there's Thorn's Spotlight tool. I would say the Memex project, obviously. Yeah, those are the major ones that come to mind. So there's other people in the space that are collaborators. Polaris Project runs a national hotline, which is wonderful. It's not a competing tool or something. Not that there's any real competition. It's like another tool out there. but it's certainly used for anti-trafficking endeavors. Also, DoSomething.org has...
What was that tool called? I'm sorry.
Polaris Project has a national hotline for folks that might be trafficked. You can call in or text in, and they will record your call and get you to local authorities. So the Polaris Project is a nonprofit, I think, based out of DC, and they do a lot of wonderful work. Data scientists will work for them sort of on a volunteer basis. Also, DataKind, who are friends of mine, do some great anti-trafficking work, among other things. But I don't know if their endeavors are publicly available. DataKind tends to shy away from publicity because they're wonderful people and don't like the spotlight at all. Let me think if there's anyone else.
Do something you started to say before I really
right. Also, right. So there's also DoSomething.org. So they are more broadly focused. They're a help center for teens. You can text in. Sometimes people will text in things like, I want to kill myself, and they will sort of respond to it. So it's like a general purpose crisis center. But I know they've had a few instances of people saying, help me, I'm a slave, or help me, I'm being raped by my dad, or help me, I'm being trafficked even. And so they'll do stuff to help those people in those situations get out of it. So these are some examples of platforms. Typically it's either scraping or, hotline type of thing, or some image recognition software. So that's just a short list. I'm sure there are more tools that I'm not aware of. I haven't talked to everyone in the space yet. Oh, there's also Rescue Forensics. They are trying to be data scientists that are working on an early stage startup that wants to do this as well. I got to see a little bit of their tool a while back, and it looked interesting. It shows a lot of promise.
So what would it take for other municipalities and law enforcement agencies to get started with using your tools?
Pretty much just go to my GitHub account. It's GitHub/E Eric S SCHLES. The two tools that are available right now are Alert System and Investigator. It's sort of a play on words because it's Investa and then _Gator, and then the tool has a picture of an alligator in a vest. And those two tools are open source, and you can start using them now. You can also contact me. My email address is ericschles@gmail.com. It's just my name @gmail.com. And reach out, and I'd be happy to collaborate with you, probably connect with my boss, and then we would start building stuff. I do work with some other cities, and I do volunteer with a number of nonprofits who are interested in anti-trafficking things, so it's certainly something I like to do. I help too many people. Hopefully I help too many people.
That's a good feeling to have, I should say, especially in your line of work. So how can our listeners get involved and help with this project?
So if you're interested in helping, just tweet at me, Eric Schles, or E, S, or email me, or volunteer for one of the many nonprofits that are interested in anti-trafficking endeavors, or you can volunteer at something having to do with children and be a mentor for someone, because underprivileged children are the most at risk to be trafficked. So if you make a difference in someone's life, they are much, much less likely to be trafficked in the future, especially at an early age.
That's great. So is there anything that you feel like we should have asked you that didn't, or there's any message that you would care to give to people in the technical community that you feel like that you want to say, basically, that you want to get out there? What would it be?
There is a world of good waiting to happen, and all we need to do is believe that we are capable of changing things. Literally, technology, writing code, it just means being able to be content creators. That's how we change opinions, points of view, is we get people to listen. Our jobs are literally to get eyeballs onto screens. We just have to sort of direct them to the right ideas. And we have the platform now like we've never had before. It used to be, just TV folks. Now anyone can put up a website. Now anyone who has creativity and passion and design skills or drive can be heard. And we have a responsibility as the people driving who listens and who hears to make it a more equitable, inclusive, small, warm, and safe place to be alive. So yeah, that would be all I say.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, I think now it's time to go to the picks, so I'll get us started off. My first pick today is a Twitter account called Accidental Art, which is an account where people will post data visualizations that they have created accidentally while trying to create other data visualizations. So it's just a lot of really interesting and occasionally beautiful visualizations of data that went wrong, and just some of the interesting things that come out of that. And my next pick is a website called tldrlegal.com, which is a site for being able to quickly gain information about and compare different open source licenses, so that if you're creating a new project or you're evaluating a project and you want to know what some of the details of the license is without necessarily having to read the entire text of it, you can go there and it will just give you the Cliffs Notes version, and you can also pick different licenses and it'll show you a compare and contrast between them. And my last pick is a band called Richelieu, which I started listening to recently, that is kind of hard to classify the genre, but the best way I can describe it is that their sound is somewhat similar to Tool. And if you like Tool's music, you'll probably like Richelieu's music as well. Chris, go ahead.
Very cool. My first pick is, this week I'm not going to pick a beer, which is shocking to anybody who's been listening to the podcast for a while, because I usually pick beer. But in this week, I'm going to pick some different things. Oh, I lied. I have a beer at the end. Sorry. Neil Gaiman's Sandman Overture. I've been a huge fan of Neil Gaiman and his work. I love his comics. I love his literature. And the Sandman series is just amazing. When I was in college, all these many years ago, because I'm old, our visual media design teacher said, go find a comic book series. Don't just walk into the store and get one because I'm telling you to. Take the time, browse, find something you like. And I realized that Men in Tights didn't really do anything for me. And I encountered Sandman, and it's this incredibly rich, mythic story that in fact is so rich and detailed that a bunch of experts from around the world started annotating his stories and with the actual mythic references that he was including in his work. And it was just incredible. I have the entire original series in hardcover. And last year, he has actually come out. He's, after like a 15-year hiatus, he has started back again with a new set of stories in the Sandman universe. And they are fantastic. Usually, so often at least, an artist takes a long break from something and comes back, and it's like, yeah, maybe you should have left it alone. But these are phenomenal. The artwork is so gorgeous that I have to resist showing my wife, look, isn't that amazing? Because she's sick of me by this point. But I really feel like every other page that I turn, I think, I'd love to see that as a poster on my wall. It's that beautiful. So my next pick is a restaurant called Hen of the Wood in Waterbury, Vermont. It is a unique place. It's kind of a foodie destination, so you probably want to make a reservation well in advance. One of the cool things that makes it worth mentioning, aside from the amazing food, is that you can get a seat that is literally overlooking a waterfall. So you're getting spray from the waterfall while you have your meal. It's a pretty cool place. For my last pick, I am going to pick a beer, despite what I said initially. It is the Alchemist Brewing Company's Heady Topper. They're a brewing company from Vermont, also from Waterbury. They used to have a brew pub that unfortunately got taken out by a hurricane, so now they just brew beer. And Heady Topper is delicious. It's also in the category of hoppy beers that are really great, have a really great smooth finish, and people drive for 3 states or more to come get this beer, so it's definitely worth a try. And that's it for me. Eric, what picks do you have for us?
So I have quite a few. One would be my friend James Powell's blog, seriously.don'tusethiscode.com. He is a dear friend and writes crazy, awesome, intense things, and I love all the crazy Python internals he talks about. That would be my first. My second pick would probably be Julia Nunes. She's a relatively unknown recording artist, and she uses a ukulele, and her exquisite vocal styles to make wonderful, like, thoughtful music. And I got to see her in concert a while back. She's great live. And then I would say third and finally, I've been looking for this website. I'm not sure I'm spelling it right. Okay, whatever. I'll just say the third is an old favorite, xkcd.com. If you guys don't know XKCD, then you're missing out on one of the greatest web series comic things of all time. So, old standby. I think I read it every day. It's phenomenal and the only thing that makes me laugh consistently.
Yeah, the XKCD is in fact fantastic, and it's really funny. I just found myself reading Mastering Emacs because I switched to Emacs recently, or back to Emacs, I should say. In the book, they have a reference. They included the MetaX butterflies. XKCD, great one. I mean, it's so clever. So great stuff.
And for those of you who occasionally read XKCD and don't have a clue what he's talking about, which I'm sure we all have occasionally because he's such an esoteric and brilliant individual, there's actually a companion website called explainxkcd.com, which is a wiki of people explaining the various references that he includes in his comics.
Well, that's awesome. I didn't know about that.
Eric, we really appreciate you taking the time to come on and talk to us about the incredible work that you're doing. And for anybody who would like to follow you and keep track of what you're up to, what's the best way for them to do that?
So Twitter is pretty good. Email is fine if you want to contact me about things. Yeah, I would say actually Twitter is probably the easiest way to contact me. I check my Twitter feed, unfortunately, like bi-daily because I like reading the news when I have nothing to do.
You know, one question, I'm sorry, Tobias, I don't mean to break the script here, but one thing I've been wondering about, and I haven't been able to kind of figure out from web searching, I read a lot about Memex in the news and whatnot. Is that something that's eventually going to be open sourced? Is it open sourced yet?
It is open source, yeah. It is open source, but we don't talk about it. So people, you can, if you know, it's kind of like security by obscurity. If you know where to find Memex, you know where the code is. If you don't know where to find Memex, you don't know where the code is. And people don't open source things until the last possible moment. This is sort of how Darpa works with all of its projects. It makes sure everything's open source, but it doesn't tell you how to find anything. So since I'm pilot member, know where all the source code is. I don't think I should or will share that information. But yeah, if you're due diligent enough and you happen to know who all the Memex pilot partners are, then you can find their source code.
Fair enough.
Excellent.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you both.
Incredible conversation and very powerful. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you both for taking the time. This has been a wonderful opportunity. I always love talking about my work with thoughtful, interested, and genuinely wonderful humans like yourselves.